Thank you for joining me on the Investing for Freedom podcast. Today, I've got a returning guest, Miss Kara Ayala, and we are going to be recapping the last few weeks, which have been just super fun, enlightening. We've been with some amazing couples, and it's just been a great few weeks. But wanted to talk about just some things today regarding community, and who knows what we're going to get into, but values, some conversations that have just really meant a lot to us lately. And as always, it's just fun having her on the show. Let's get into it.
So it's been so fun just these last couple of weeks because we are newly empty nesters. Our daughter moved to Ireland for 6 months. I mean, she'll be back, but I feel like this is just a new kind of like officially marked a season where our last child has kind of flown the nest, right? So it's been really interesting and fun to just explore what this can look like because we have been so, our goals have been surrounded around how we set up our lives around our kids and our time and things like that it's been interesting to kind of step out of that box, I guess you'd say, and explore and see what is possible and how we want to live this next season of our lives.
Yeah, it's interesting because even, when Dylan moved out and then Tim moved out for a season and, kids come and go. And like you said, I think Caton will probably be back. We hope. But it's an interesting feeling because we've always had, one or two at home. And even though they're older, like you don't feel a sense of obligation per se, but I guess there is a little bit because even trips and this last year, I remember when Caton was even here and, there were some times where we were traveling a lot and she'd be like, where are you guys going? And she's technically an adult. And so we kind of are in this weird spot where we don't feel like we need to check in with her anymore. But also she's like, wait, you're traveling again? And I don't know, we're kind of past all that. And so it's like this weird new zone.
Yeah. And I think, when you're living in the same household, you're a part of a family unit. There's like a unit there, right? So you kind of have to ebb and flow and keep each other updated on what's happening. So it has felt weird just to be able to not, have anybody that is waiting at home besides our dogs, which our boys both took turns and watched our dogs for us. But we had a trip that was planned to Ojai, California with a group that we are a part of, a community we are a part of called the Wellspring. And then 2 weeks later, we had a trip that we were speaking at Brandon Turner's event called Better Marriage. And we just thought, well, why would we come home? We don't really have to come home. What would it look like if we just stayed for the entire 2 weeks in California? So that was really fun.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever really done anything like that where, we stayed literally at 4 different places over the course of 2 weeks and it was just fun. And I think, we talk a lot about this when it comes to just different seasons and recognizing, where you're at and the importance of being able to get away. One thing that we always did, even when the kids were little, like we always took trips. Even, when they were one, like we would we set like this hard date and we would go on trips, but to be able to just, go to Ojai and then stay with some friends and then stay at a house by ourselves for 4 or 5 days and then go to the event was cool. And, it's just a new season. But I think what we need to be aware of is at all seasons, we need that community. We need to be not only away from, the kids in our life, we need to be away with each other, but we also need to be away in community with other adults.
Yeah, I think that is one thing that I've really noticed is most of our big leaps that I see that we've taken in the past, 16 years, it's been when we've inserted ourselves into environments and into communities of people who were doing what we wanted to do or people we wanted to, there was actually a question that I just read the other day. It was like, who in your life is really killing it at this certain goal? And it makes you really sit back and reflect of like, who do I want to surround myself with? So whatever that it is that you're desiring in your life, you have to make sure that you're like inserting yourself into those environments. And I think that has been huge for us of like inserting ourselves into communities, but also even just changing your environment because we get so in our routine of this, go to work, you get up at a certain time, you do your morning routine. Like most people have like a routine that they get into, get the kids fed, whatever that looks like for you in the season that you're in. And so it's important that we pull away from that, a couple of times a year. I think doing trips, just the two of you, but then there's also that piece of being in community with other people and other couples in general. If you're not a couple, just other people, but as a couple, it's not a lone lone journey, right? Like so many times I think we get married and it's just the two of us against the world, but there's so much power in like surrounding yourself with other couples. And that's one thing that I think we've truly been blessed with is other couples who show us different ways of thinking and they expand us, but we've done it on purpose. It hasn't just happened. These people didn't just show up in our lives. We've actually sought them out.
Yeah. And I think the intention around that is super important. Just even like what you were saying, we went to Ojai to, part of the Wellspring trip. And this community is, you don't have to be a couple to be in it. But it's full of just amazing couples. And I was thinking too, like you never know when you go to an event, what answer you're going to get. And so it's super important that number one, we put ourselves in environments where we can be surrounded with people. You don't even know what you need half the time.
Yeah.
Until you really get into the conversation. And I remember when I first started going to mastermind, my first mastermind was in 2016, the real estate guys. And I'd done coaching and stuff before that, but I remember first going to the masterminds and I'd be like, really, I was like, okay, I'm going to get this answer. But then I started like, after doing that for a year or two, I started just getting really intentional around just being, I don't really know what I'm here for. I'm just going to have the conversations that get put in front of me. I'm just going to free flow and get the answers that I need, but you never know what answers you're going to get. Half the time, the answers you get, you didn't even know you needed.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm just going to do a little recap of me especially in that Wellspring event. I went into that week feeling kind of, I don't know if it was the shakeup of Caton leaving and me traveling a lot, which I continued to travel, but I just was feeling burnt out and kind of like I wanted to blow everything up. That was like my attitude and the way that I was going in it, and actually kind of even searching for God to give me the red or the green flag, I guess it would be, of like, yeah, you can blow it up and you don't have to do these things, right? But it's so cool when you're saying that, because I called them keys by the end of the trip because I had, whether it was a speaker or a certain conversation I had, or somebody saying something to me, somebody reading something, there were all these keys that brought me back onto my path and back to my values and where I want to go. But I had just felt discouraged. But if I hadn't put myself in that room, I wouldn't have gotten all of those keys. And it's interesting because at the end of the trip, they actually gave us a key as one of the gifts, and it said possibilities on it. But I thought it was so interesting because maybe 5 minutes before that, I was telling you, I feel like I've just been getting all these keys and it's like a treasure hunt, and I get this little answer, and then I have this next conversation and I get another answer for something that I've been really contemplating. And then at the end, then we go to our room and see that they've gifted us this key that says possibilities. And I'm like, okay. But it's so cool when you're surrounded by people who are thinking big, who are doing big things, who struggle with the same things that you struggle with. And I think that that's something that isn't talked about enough, is the times where it is hard, or, you do feel like giving up. And so when you're around people who have done that and they've overcame it and they expand what is possible for you, it's priceless.
Yeah. I'm thinking, as you're saying that, there's a scripture that I love in Proverbs. I think it's in Proverbs 18, and it says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when inspiration comes, it's a tree of life. And, once a year, we just get stuck in these routines, like you were saying. And, once a year isn't enough to just like go on vacation.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if you want to live a mediocre existence, but the thing that I've realized is, the more you grow and the faster you're moving and the more challenging life gets, which again, I've said this so many times, but I think people think that, life gets easier. You see somebody, like you were saying earlier, that you want to emulate. Like, who do I want to be like in this area? Well, maybe a good question around that is like, who is kicking butt, but that they get their butt handed to them because they're doing things on such a high level. Because I think people think that, as life gets better and we look up to these people, that it gets easier, and it doesn't. They just learn how to battle on a different area, or a different level. But what I was getting at is like, I don't think that taking a vacation once a year is enough. You have to get surrounded by people who inspire you and connect you with those keys, as you were saying that, because like if we spend too much time in our own world and we get into that place of like hope deferred, literally making the heart sick, we lose just all inspiration. But what it says is when inspiration comes, it's a tree of life. So the question that I would have right now for the listeners is like, where do you go to get inspiration? And I was thinking as you were saying that, you know, we went to Wellspring and we got inspiration. And then we went and spent a few days with our good friends, Rich and Kathy Fetke, inspiring, right? Just staying at their beautiful place in Malibu and just having amazing conversations over dinner and drinks with them. That's inspiration, right? And then we get to go stay at Chris and Lori's house there in Wisconsin. And I just asked if he was going to, you know, be there. And he's like, no, but use the house. And they have this beautiful house in Newport, and inspiration, right? We have to get out of our environment and get into these places where because if we spend too much time in that place where we're living in hope deferred, which we all get there. If we spend too much time in our day-to-day routine, we get beat up. We have to get into, and it doesn't mean you have to take a big trip to Hawaii or whatever. You know, for us, that's a big part of inspiration, but it's just getting out of your routines at minimum. And then I think you do need to have these, you know, people and communities and trips and things that we take. Quickly, I'm thinking of even when we went to Cabo in December with Pete and Kim and some other amazing couples. You know, I didn't know exactly what we were going to get when we were there. We didn't even know who was going to be there. And then when we get closer, like there's just amazing couples that were there and we get to spend all this time. But I'm thinking about when Bobby Castro and his wife, Sophia, came over for dinner. They weren't even staying at the house. And they came over, and just that night we kind of went around and had some questions, and Bobby like kind of mirrored back some things with me that I was saying about, you know, our investment portfolio and what the future looked like. And he's like, well, why would you want to do that? You've worked so hard to do X, like, and he's just challenging my thinking around it. And that was one of those moments of like, when inspiration comes, it's a tree of life. But I didn't even know who the heck Bobby Castro was at that point in time. And this guy comes in out of nowhere and completely changes the way that I'm thinking about something just because of a comment that I made. And so you never know what room you're going to get the answers you need. And how many times have you said like, I don't know if I'm going to go on this trip, or I don't know if I'm going to go to that dinner tonight, and you go and it changes the entire trajectory of your life. It's crazy.
It is. You know, as you're saying that, just talking about like just going on a vacation, like you're not always going to get that inspiration. There is a time and a place for that as well, I think. Sure. But I think if that's the only thing that you're doing, nobody's challenging you. You're not seeing different perspectives. And sometimes, like if I would have went on a vacation at that moment, I would have probably really checked out, because I'm like, this is vacation, right? Like I would have checked out of what my mission is and what my purpose is. And I was just, as you were just talking, I was thinking about those 2 weeks that we had. We kind of went through every probably part that you need as an environment change. Yeah. It's interesting. So like we started out with like an actual mastermind. So a community of people who are there for a purpose. There's speakers, you know, there's a lot of that going on. Then from there, we went and spent a couple of days with a couple that we just adore, and, you know, had really amazing conversations. And speaking of, you know, sharing their wins and their losses with us, that was a big part of the conversation of like, how did you handle these things? And, but we wouldn't know those people. We wouldn't know Rich and Kathy if we wouldn't have joined a mastermind or went to an event years ago to have that relationship with them. So that was really fun, because that was just a trip that you would take with a friend that's yours. And, you know, you just want to go do something and get out of your environment with a couple friend that you have, or just a friend, whatever that looks like for you. And then from there, we kind of retreated and got that vacation mode I mean, we were working that week, but it was more of a relaxing recharge of a week at Chris and Lori's house. Which also we wouldn't have been there without meeting them through a mastermind, a community that we had, an event that I had went to where we were introduced to who Chris was. But then really inserting us into their lives of like establishing a relationship. You don't just stay at somebody's house or go visit somebody in their home without a continuation of that relationship. And then we went from there to a giving part where we went and spoke at Brandon Turner's event, and where we were giving back to a community. So it was kind of like I never really put that together, that we got to experience all of the kind of ways that you can recharge and change your environment in the matter of 2 weeks. But I think it's important to know, like, what am I needing right now? Or looking at your spouse and being like, what do we need right now? Do we need community around us? Do we have a friend we could go spend some time with that we know we're going to get that inspiration with? Do we need to check out and go on vacation and reconnect together? Or do we need to be giving together?
Yeah, it's so good. And, I've said this for years. Put yourself in environments where you can spend time with other humans. We need other humans. Other humans have the answers for us. And even what you're talking about, like with the Better Life Tribe, speaking at Brandon Turner's event, like if you connect the dots backwards, like, we met Tarl and Grace through Kathy and Rich at a dinner. I was at a random dinner in Dallas, and they've become friends of ours. And we were at brunch 4 months ago and talking with Tarl, and then Tarl kind of helped with the Better Life conference and kind of, put us there as a speaker. All those dots get connected backwards. But I think people might look at something like that and be like, oh, they're just special or whatever. No, it's like you put yourself in environments, you meet people. We play the long game with this stuff too. It's purely about connections and relationships. That first and foremost, and then everything else works out. Mm-hmm. There's that old saying that like your gifts make room for you. And it's true. If you just show up, number one, you got to put yourself in the environment and show up. And then you just show up as your authentic self. You don't have to be anybody but you. Mm-hmm. And I think where people get it wrong is they think, well, I don't want to go into here because I don't know how to act and I don't know who to be. Number one, go there. And number two, just be yourself, because what people need is the authentic version of you. And then you have to keep showing up. And I don't think that there's anything better than navigating this as a couple too. It's been super fun just thinking back on those couple weeks and being able to be with different couples and the events that we were at. It's my favorite thing to do.
I know. Well, as you're saying that, like there's, our good friend, Lindsay Schwartz always says, we're not meant to do life or business alone. Mm-hmm. And so many times we're trying to just do it all ourselves and charge through life, but we're not meant to do that. We're meant to live in community. We're meant to have those relationships. And, as you were just talking about rewinding backwards, I think every one of those like insertions of like having, even when we went to that brunch, it was a day that, we almost didn't go.
Yep.
Because of some things that were happening in our family. So there was a resistance to that. So I want to encourage you, if there's ever resistance, our first, remember we went on the Real Estate Guys cruise, and it was not cheap. And we were not really in the financial position to be making that kind of an investment. We just joined the mastermind, which was huge. And then now we're going to go on this trip. So it wasn't convenient financially. It wasn't convenient, for us. But if we hadn't went on that trip, I guarantee we would not be where we are today.
No.
There's no way possible if I rewind backwards, because it opened up so many possibilities for us, relationships for us, opened our mind beyond anything we had ever dreamed or thought of. So I think that that's really important, is if there's a resistance towards it, doesn't mean that you shouldn't push through that. Anything you can do to be in community with other people, especially, and you kind of know when it's that thing, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just a little brunch that you're going to that's just a casual thing, and there can still be resistance, and you have to push through and know and discern when you're supposed to be in that room, because every time you're with another person, you're going to get an answer back.
Yeah. And I was thinking back to the Real Estate Guys thing too. Everything you were talking about, money, time, everything will keep you. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we listen to it, there's always a valid reason why we shouldn't do something. I was thinking about, even that was 2016, and thinking about leaving the kids for that long, because that was a 12-day trip or something. By the time they do we have to travel, and then there's the 2 days on land, and then there's sea for 7 days. This is a big trip. So it's not only money and time. If we're going to do a trip that big, doing it without the kids is mm-hmm. That was another real pressure point at that point in time. And I'm just so glad that we did it, because as you said, I mean, we've met so many amazing people, Rich and Kathy, and some of our best friends in the world, Ken and Ken McElroy, so many of these people that just connected and kept connecting and kept connecting. It's the circle gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but you also start identifying these people that are key relationships in your life. And in some ways it starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller too, mm-hmm. with amazing humans. And you just keep seeing that. I was thinking about Chris and Lori, and then Elliot and Lindsay. And I was having this conversation earlier today, because I connected 2 people today, and I met both of them through Chris Harder. Mm. But then I was connecting them and they're both just so, I'm thinking they're probably going to go do some big things, but that's how the world works. And if we just stay in our comfort zone and we don't stretch and we don't resist either way, depending on how you think of it, we've got to get in the rooms.
Yeah. I think a lot of this comes back to like healing those old stories that we have around money, around time, around what that looks like too, because, money can be a real resistance for people of like, I don't want to pay that. That's too much money. You hear these like stories, but I want you just to think about your life. And if the results that you're getting with the actions that you're doing aren't getting you where you want to be, then you're going to have to do something different, and you're going to have to rewrite that wiring in your brain. And one thing that I've really learned is I'm always provided for. There's never been a time. Have there been tight times? Yeah, you better believe there's been times where we're like, how are we going to make this? But I've never not been provided for. And I think when you're stepping out in faith, I'm not saying just be careless, but be intentional and don't be scared to spend money to get it into rooms and to experience those new rooms.
Even at the Wellspring, Erwin McManus was talking, it was kind of a theme there too, but talking about fear. Mm-hmm. And all the speakers, like this was an ongoing thing.
Events and communities all around those pillars, because that's who we want to be around. So what would it look like if you were surrounded by 20 different couples or 100 different couples who all wanted to grow together, who all liked each other, who all weren't struggling through their marriage? Because there's a room for that too. And if you are struggling in your marriage, I'm not saying that there's something wrong with that, but this room that we're creating is for couples who like each other and want to continue growing in their marriage and want to continue to have that connection. So if that sounds like couples that you would want to hang around, we actually have a really special trip that we have planned to Cabo. We only have a couple of spots, but we would love to have you join us. And we also have a couples community that it's not open right now, but it opens up a couple of times a year that would be amazing for you to join as well.
Yeah. And we'd love for you guys to join us. This is going to be an epic trip. As Kara said, that community is not even open right now. And technically, in order to go on the trip, you need to be part of the community, but we've got a couple spots. So if you're interested in that, you can text the word trip to 480-531-7519, or you could just go to nextlevelcouple.com and get on the wait list and just, shoot us an email. Let us know that you're interested in the trip either way, or DM us on Instagram.
Yeah, we always love when you guys DM us on Instagram. So if that's something that you want to be a part of, this is not just a lame trip. This is going to be very curated and a beautiful trip where we're going to have facilitated conversations. We're going to relax. We're going to play. It's going to be an amazing trip. I'm really excited about it.
We're staying at a house that is epic. It can sleep 7 couples, which is going to be awesome. The staff there is amazing. Karen and I've stayed there twice. The excursions that we have planned, the dinners we have planned are over the top, and the couples that are already signed up are amazing. So again, if you want to join us, just text the word trip to 480-531-751. Well, this has been an amazing couple weeks. Just can't stress enough how much fun it's been. And it's been great sharing it with the community too, because I think getting in these environments and these periods of time where, you're inspired, and it's just great.
Yeah, there's so many lessons that you learn. Like these past 2 weeks, I learned so many lessons and in different aspects too. So spiritual, there was some financial lessons, there was emotional, and then the giving back part of actually being able to bring our gifts to a community was really powerful too. We should do an episode on that too in the future.
Sounds good.
See you next time.
Bye.